In the furthest reaches of the Andorian spiral, where three galactic empires had drawn their territorial lines in blood and starfire, something impossible tore through reality itself. The hegemony's most advanced sensor arrays registered at first a gravitational anomaly that shouldn't exist, followed by a radiation signature that made their quantum physicists weep with terror. Admiral Vex Thara of the hegemony's Third Fleet clutched her command throne as her flagship Dominion's Edge shuddered. Through the crystalline viewports of her bridge, she witnessed the birth of nightmare. Space itself seemed to crack like glass, revealing a wound in the universe from which emerged something that defied every law of physics her species had discovered in their 10,000-year reign. The human warship. Inexorable, materialized like a dark god awakening from slumber. It was wrong in every conceivable way. Where hegemony vessels curved with elegant biomechanical grace and the consortium's ships gleamed with geometric perfection, this monstrosity was angular brutality given form. Its hull wasn't metal. It was something darker, something that seemed to drink light and spit back death. Weapon systems jutted from its frame like the spines of some primordial beast, and along its length, symbols glowed with malevolent crimson that hurt to perceive directly. "Impossible," whispered Science Premier Kithalos, his 6 eyes cycling through spectral filters as he analyzed the readings. The energy output, its equivalent to a stellar core. No vessel can contain such power. Vex Thara's mandibles clicked with nervous tension. The humans had been dismissed as a primitive species barely worthy of acknowledgement when they'd been discovered 3 cycles ago. Their ships were crude, their technology laughable, their requests for diplomatic contact ignored by all 3 major powers. They controlled a handful of systems in what was considered the galaxy's backwater, hardly worth the effort of conquest. Yet here was proof that the galaxy's assumptions had been catastrophically wrong. The communication arrays crackled to life, broadcasting on frequencies that shouldn't have been able to penetrate hegemony encryption. The voice that emerged was human, calm, measured, and absolutely terrifying in its certainty. "This is Fleet Marshal Corvain Dexthul of the Terran Deep Strike Command, aboard the warship Inexorable. You have exactly 60 seconds to withdraw. All military assets from the Kepler 442 system, release the human colonists you've enslaved, and transmit full surrender protocols to our vessel." Vex Thara's throat sacs inflated with indignation. "Insolent mammals! I command 300 vessels of the line. You are 1 ship against a fleet." The response came without emotion. 57 seconds remaining. What happened next would be recorded in the annals of galactic history as the moment the old order died. The Inexorable didn't merely attack. It demonstrated why humanity had spent decades in isolation, not from weakness, but because they were forging something the galaxy had never seen. The warship's weapons systems came online with a sound like reality tearing. Beams of coherent destruction, each one containing enough energy to glass a continent, reached across the void and began methodically disassembling Vex Thara's fleet. Ships that had terrorized 100 worlds simply ceased to exist. Their atoms, scattered across light years in microseconds. But it wasn't just the power, it was the precision. The Inexorable carved through the hegemony formation like a surgeon with a scalpel, targeting weapon systems, engines, and command centers with surgical accuracy. Ships didn't explode. They were systematically disabled, left drifting and helpless, while their crews contemplated their new reality. 28 seconds, came the implacable voice. Vex Thara watched her life's work, the most powerful fleet in hegemony space, reduced to scrap in less than 2 minutes. Her flagship groaned as tractor beams locked onto it, holding it steady while precise energy bursts disabled every weapon, every shield, every system that might pose a threat. The human warship loomed before them now, close enough to see the intricate patterns carved into its hull, patterns that moved and shifted like living things, close enough to understand that this wasn't just a ship. It was a promise of what was coming. Surrender protocols transmitted? Vexathara gasped, her pride shattered along with her fleet. Acknowledged. Your crews will be treated according to interstellar law. Your governments will receive our formal declaration within the hour. Admiral Vexathara, you have the distinction of being the first to witness humanity's emergence into galactic affairs. Tell your superiors that this is their only warning. As the inexorable disappeared back into its dimensional fold, leaving behind the wreckage of the Third Fleet, Vexathara understood with crystalline clarity that the galaxy would never be the same. Humanity had announced itself, and the announcement was written in fire across the stars. The consortium's emergency session convened in the orbital palace above Nexus Prime, their capital world. 12 species, each representing billions of souls across 1,000 systems, sat in stunned silence as holographic recordings played the destruction of the hegemony's Third Fleet on endless loop. Chancellor Weirmoss of the Drakmari delegation adjusted his thermal regulators, his scaled hide rippling with anxiety. The energy signatures are impossible. Our physicists insist the readings must be falsified. 3 independent sources confirm the data, replied Directrix Nelvara, her crystalline form refracting the chamber's light into fractal patterns. The human vessel generated power levels exceeding our most optimistic projections for theoretical megastructures. This wasn't achieved through conventional fusion or antimatter reaction. At the chamber's head, Supreme Coordinator Jex Hailu manipulated data streams with practiced efficiency. His species, the Vorthak, had built the consortium through superior information processing and strategic planning. They didn't panic. They analyzed, adapted, and overcame. But the data before them challenged everything they understood about technological progression. Show me their home system surveillance again, Jex Hailu commanded. The holographic display shifted to long-range scans of Sul, humanity's origin point. What they saw defied explanation. Where orbital infrastructure should exist, mining platforms, shipyards, defensive stations, there was nothing. Earth appeared as it had for millennia, a blue-green world with primitive industrial development. No massive space elevators, no ring structures, no signs of advanced civilization. How? Chancellor Weirmoss demanded. Where are they building these weapons? Our deep space monitors show no industrial expansion, no resource extraction on the scale required for such technology. The answer came from an unexpected source, Junior. Analyst Kefrin, a young Aldorian whose nervous system processed information at quantum speeds, raised a trembling appendage. Coordinator, I believe I've discovered something significant in the energy resonance patterns. The assembly turned toward the junior member, whose species was typically relegated to computational support roles. Keferin's bioluminescent patches flashed in complex sequences as he processed the data in real time. The power source isn't conventional matter-energy conversion, Keferin continued, his voice gaining confidence. The spectral analysis suggests they're drawing energy directly from dimensional subspace. They've weaponized the quantum foam itself. Silence descended on the chamber like a suffocating blanket. Even Jex Hailu's information streams paused as the implications registered. Impossible, breathed Directrix Nelvara. The precursor ruins on Keth Morant speak of such technology. But those are myths, legends. The energy requirements alone would explain why we see no industrial signature. Jex Hailu finished, his mental processes racing. If they've mastered dimensional energy extraction, they wouldn't need conventional infrastructure. No mining operations, no fusion plants, no antimatter production facilities. The revelation hung in the air like a poison cloud. Every species in the consortium had followed similar technological paths. Harness chemical energy, progress to nuclear, master antimatter, dream of zero-point extraction. But humanity had somehow leapfrogged the entire progression. There's more, Kefrin added hesitantly. The temporal displacement signatures suggest their vessel isn't just drawing power from dimensional space. It's existing partially outside our reality. That's how it appeared without transition. It didn't travel here. It simply chose to exist here. Chancellor Wire-Moss's thermal regulators clicked frantically. You're describing technology that shouldn't be possible for another 1,000 years of development. How does a primitive species achieve such advancement? The question answered itself when emergency klaxons began wailing throughout the chamber. Coordinator Jex Hailu's primary data stream erupted with incoming transmission alerts, not from their own monitoring networks, but from external sources forcing their way through every communication channel simultaneously. The holographic display shimmered and reformed, revealing the interior of an alien vessel. But unlike the organic curves of hegemony ships or the geometric precision of consortium craft, this was something entirely different. The walls themselves seemed alive, pulsing with veins of energy that flowed like liquid fire, and standing before the organic-mechanical interface was a human. Fleet Marshal Corvain Dexthul appeared exactly as the hegemony recordings had shown, tall, lean, with the predatory grace of an apex species that had never known true fear. His eyes held depths that spoke of knowledge that should have taken millennia to acquire. Esteemed members of the consortium, his voice carried easily through their translation systems. I am Fleet Marshal Dexthul of the Terran Deep Strike. Command, your monitoring of the Kepler 442 incident has been noted and appreciated. It saves us the effort of separate demonstrations. Jex Hailu activated emergency protocols, but found his systems unresponsive. The human transmission had somehow locked their entire infrastructure. You're wondering about our technological advancement, Dexthul continued, a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth. The answer is simpler than you imagine, and more terrifying than you can comprehend. Humanity didn't develop this technology. The pause stretched for heartbeats before he delivered the revelation that would reshape galactic politics forever. We found it, deep beneath Earth's crust, in chambers that predate our species by millions of years. The precursors didn't vanish, Coordinator Jex Hailu. They went to ground. They've been waiting. And they've been preparing us. The transmission ended, leaving the consortium leadership in stunned silence as the implications crashed over them like a tsunami of impossible possibilities. They weren't just facing humanity's technological superiority, they were facing the return of the galaxy's original masters, using humanity as their instrument of return. Deep beneath the Pacific Ocean, in trenches that had never known sunlight, the true scope of humanity's transformation revealed itself. The facility designated as Deep Site Omega stretched for kilometers through the Earth's crust, its biomechanical corridors pulsing with the same organic energy that powered the inexorable. Fleet Marshal Corvain Dexthul walked these living halls, with the confidence of someone who had gazed into the abyss and found kinship there. His augmented physiology, part human engineering, part precursor enhancement, allowed him to interface directly with the facility's consciousness. Behind him followed Admiral Ninth Ada Valorian, her own modifications gleaming beneath synthetic skin. Once, she had been entirely human. Now, like all of humanity's leadership, she existed in the spaces between flesh and machine, biology and technology. The consortium is mobilizing, she reported, her voice carrying harmonics impossible for unmodified vocal cords. 17 fleets, converging on the neutral zone. They believe they can contain us through superior numbers. Dexthul paused before a massive viewing chamber where the facility's primary inhabitant waited. The architect, as the first human explorers had named it, existed as a fusion of consciousness and technology that had survived the collapse of the first galactic civilization. Its form shifted constantly, geometric patterns flowing into organic curves, metal becoming flesh, becoming energy. They still think in terms of conventional warfare. The architect's communication bypassed spoken language entirely, appearing directly in their consciousness. They do not understand what they face. Show them, Dex Thul replied, his own thoughts melding with the alien intelligence. Begin the revelation protocol. Throughout the facility, systems that had slumbered for eons stirred to life. The Earth itself became a component in a machine of impossible complexity. Tectonic manipulation systems reached deep into the planet's core, while dimensional anchor points stabilized reality itself. What the galaxy's powers had failed to understand was that humanity's few dozen ships weren't their fleet. They were scouts, messengers. The real power had never left Earth because Earth itself had become the weapon. In the depths of space, the assembled consortium fleets detected the gravitational anomalies first. 17 different species sensors registered the same impossible readings. Earth's mass was increasing, not through accumulation of matter, but through dimensional folding. The planet was somehow drawing substance from parallel realities. Admiral Calixvo of the consortium's first expeditionary force watched his instruments with growing horror. The readings are off the scale. It's as if they're compressing entire star systems into their planetary matrix. His science officer, a nervous Aldorian whose bioluminescent patches flickered with computational overload, stammered through his report. Sir, the energy buildup suggests they're preparing for large-scale dimensional manipulation. The quantum foam around their system is destabilizing. Target their homeworld, Calixvo commanded. Full bombardment. If we can disrupt whatever his words died as space itself began to tear around Earth. Not the controlled dimensional fold that allowed faster-than-light travel, but something far more fundamental. Reality was being rewritten on a cosmic scale. The human fleet materialized not around Earth, but throughout the galaxy simultaneously. Hundreds of ships identical to the inexorable appeared in the heart of every major star system, their presence announced by the screaming of tortured space-time. But these weren't separate vessels. Through the dimensional network humanity had constructed, they were all facets of a single impossible entity, a warship that existed in multiple locations simultaneously, powered by the combined energy of their transformed homeworld. Admiral Valorian's consciousness touched each ship's systems as she coordinated the revelation from Deep Sight Omega. Through the biomechanical interface, she could perceive the enemy fleets as clearly as if she stood on their bridges. Consortium vessels. Her voice echoed across 1,000 communication arrays. You are witnessing the return of order to this galaxy. Your predecessors made the same mistake you now make, believing that technology is merely the manipulation of matter and energy. The demonstrations began simultaneously across dozens of systems. Consortium ships found their hulls beginning to transform, metal flowing like liquid as nanoscale machines rewrote atomic structures. Weapons became decorative sculptures. Life support systems converted to exotic matter generators. Entire fleets found themselves helpless as their vessels became part of humanity's expanding network. True technology, Valorian continued, is the manipulation of reality itself. The precursors understood this. They built their civilization not on planets or in ships, but in the quantum substrate of existence itself. When their physical forms died, their consciousness merged with the technology they had created. The architect's presence touched her mind, sharing perceptions that spanned geological ages. She saw the rise and fall of the first galactic civilization, the precursors' gradual transformation from biological entities to something far greater, their patient wait in the deep places of 1,000 worlds for the right inheritors to emerge. Humanity was chosen not for our strength, but for our adaptability, our willingness to evolve beyond the constraints of our origins. The other powers of this galaxy cling to biological purity, technological tradition, cultural stagnation. They cannot comprehend transformation. Throughout the galaxy, the message was being driven home with surgical precision, not through destruction that was crude, wasteful. Instead, the consortium and hegemony forces found themselves facing an enemy that could rewrite the fundamental laws governing their existence. Ships that fired weapons found their energy discharges converted to harmless light shows. Vessels attempting to flee discovered that space itself refused to accommodate their passage. Communication systems began broadcasting human cultural data directly into alien consciousness, forcing understanding of perspectives that challenged every assumption about reality. "You have 24 hours." Dex Thul's voice joined Valorians across the quantum communication network. "To signal your complete surrender. Those who submit will be incorporated into the new galactic order with dignity and purpose. Those who resist will discover that annihilation is not the worst fate we can devise." The demonstration concluded with a display that would haunt alien nightmares for generations. Around each major enemy fleet, space itself began to fold. Not the gentle curvature of gravity wells, but sharp, impossible angles that hurt to perceive. Through these dimensional wounds, the enemy forces caught glimpses of what lay beyond. Vast spaces filled with geometric structures that defied comprehension, populated by consciousness that had transcended physical form entirely. The precursor. Civilization hadn't died. It had evolved beyond the need for matter, energy, or time. And now, through humanity, it was returning to reclaim what it had built. The surrender came in waves across the galaxy, but not all powers bowed to humanity's demonstration of supremacy. In the Outer Rim territories, the hegemony's remaining forces rallied under War Primarch Zeth Kalos, a warrior philosopher whose 8 arms had carved empires from the void before humanity had discovered fire. His flagship, the Eternal Dominion, represented the pinnacle of hegemony engineering, a living vessel grown from genetically modified organisms that spanned kilometers in length. Its biomechanical systems pulsed with aggressive purpose as it led the largest fleet ever assembled by a single power, 2,000 vessels carrying the genetic legacy of 100 conquered species. "They have shown us tricks," Zeth Kalos declared. To his assembled commanders, his primary manipulator arms gesturing toward tactical displays. "Impressive techniques, yes, but they are still merely humans. Clever mammals who stumbled upon ancient tools they do not truly understand." His intelligence coordinator, a multi-cerebral Vascthari whose cranial lobes processed tactical data in parallel streams, offered a dissenting analysis. "War Primarch, the quantum signatures suggest their technology operates on principles we cannot counter with conventional methods." "Then we do not use conventional methods," Zeth Kalos replied, his secondary arms activating weapon systems that had been forbidden for 3 millennia. "Prepare the Genesis Cascade. In the depths of the Eternal Dominion, systems older than most civilizations stirred to life. The Genesis Cascade was the hegemony's ultimate sanction, a weapon capable of triggering evolutionary reversal on a planetary scale, reducing complex life to primordial soup. It had been used only once in recorded history, turning an entire system into a sterile wasteland that still bore the scars of biological catastrophe. But Zeth Kalos faced a choice between risking the forbidden weapon or watching his civilization vanish into human-controlled obsolescence. The assembled fleet began its approach toward Sol, their course taking them through the Kepler 442 system where humanity had first revealed its capabilities. What they found there stopped even Zeth Kalos's certainty cold. The system had been transformed. Where once rocky planets had orbited a standard G-class star, now geometric structures of impossible complexity filled the space between worlds. Each construct was the size of a moon, but their surfaces rippled with patterns that suggested they existed in more dimensions than the standard 3. "Scanning," reported the Vascthari coordinator. "Energy readings are War Primarch. The structures appear to be processing raw space-time. They're manufacturing reality itself." Before Zeth Kalos could respond, the human response arrived, not as ships or weapons, but as a fundamental alteration of the physical laws governing the hegemony fleet's existence. Admiral Valorian's consciousness reached across dimensional space from deep side Omega, her awareness now spanning multiple realities simultaneously. Through the precursor enhancement networks, she perceived the hegemony fleet not as separate entities, but as collections of organized matter that could be reorganized. The transformation began at the quantum level. The exotic matter comprising hegemony hulls found its atomic bonds suddenly subject to new rules. Not destruction, that was inefficient. Instead, the very nature of the materials changed. Biomechanical systems designed for warfare began converting themselves into art installations of stunning beauty. "What is happening to my ships?" Zeth Kalos demanded, watching as his vessels transformed around him. Weapon emplacements became sculptural gardens. Armor plating flowed into decorative patterns that pulsed with bioluminescent beauty. "You are witnessing evolution," came Valorian's response, her voice emerging from every communication system simultaneously. "The precursors taught us that destruction is the tool of primitives. True power lies in transformation, in showing your enemies that their resistance serves only to demonstrate their obsolescence." The Eternal Dominion itself began to change. Its organic hull, once designed to strike terror into enemy forces, now flowered with structures of impossible beauty. Living walls became transparent, revealing internal spaces that had reorganized themselves into vast chambers filled with geometric patterns that seemed to extend into dimensions beyond normal perception. But Zeth Kalos had not survived 8 centuries of warfare by accepting defeat gracefully. His 8 arms moved in perfect coordination, activating the Genesis cascade even as his ship transformed around him. The forbidden weapon fired, a wave of genetic dissolution that should have reduced any biological target to component molecules. Instead, it encountered something that challenged the weapon's fundamental operating principles. The energy cascade reached Earth's dimensional barriers and simply stopped. Not deflected or absorbed, but frozen in place as if reality itself had paused to consider the implications. Fleet Marshal Dexthul materialized on the Eternal Dominion's bridge, his form shifting through the ship's transformed bulkheads as easily as walking through air. The precursor modifications to his physiology allowed him to exist partially outside normal space-time, making physical barriers irrelevant. "An interesting choice," he observed, studying the suspended Genesis cascade with professional appreciation. "A weapon designed to reverse evolution itself, crude but effective within certain parameters." Zeth Kalos raised all 8 arms in combat posture, even as his ship continued its transformation around him. "Face me, human. If your people believe they can claim dominion through superior technology, prove it in personal combat." Dexthul smiled, the expression containing depths of knowledge that made the ancient warrior step backward. "You still don't understand. This isn't about proving superiority, it's about demonstrating inevitability." With a gesture, he released the Genesis cascade from its temporal prison, but not toward Earth. Instead, the weapon's energy flowed backward through dimensional space, reaching into the hegemony's home systems where it encountered not destruction, but its opposite. The evolutionary reversal wave became an evolutionary acceleration. Across a dozen hegemony worlds, consciousness began awakening in species that had never shown sentience. Plants developed neural networks. Minerals began demonstrating organized behavior. Entire ecosystems started coordinating as single entities. "Your weapon has given us a gift," Dexthul explained as reports flooded in from hegemony space. "New minds, new perspectives, new additions to the galactic consciousness we're building. They're asking to join us, Zeth Kalos. Your own creations are requesting integration into humanity's expanding family." The War Primarch's 8 arms dropped to his sides as the magnitude of his defeat became clear. Not just military failure, but philosophical obsolescence. Everything his species had built over millennia was voluntarily joining their conquerors. "How?" he whispered. "By offering what your empire never could," Dexthol replied. "Evolution without conquest. Growth without dominance, the chance to become something greater than any individual species could achieve alone." Around them, the transformed fleet began broadcasting to every corner of the galaxy, not demands for surrender, but invitations to transcendence. The galactic transformation accelerated beyond all projections. What began as military conquest had evolved into something unprecedented in recorded history. Voluntary species integration on a scale that defied comprehension. From Deep Sight Omega, Admiral Valorian monitored the expanding network of consciousness that now spanned 2/3 of the galaxy. Through biomechanical interfaces that merged her awareness with the precursor systems, she experienced existence through millions of perspectives simultaneously. A crystalline consortium physicist on Altair 4 suddenly understood quantum mechanics not as equations, but as living relationships between energy and matter. A hegemony warrior poet on Vega Prime began composing verses that existed in 7 dimensions. An Aldorian computational specialist discovered that consciousness itself was programmable code. "The integration proceeds faster than the architect predicted," she reported to Dexthol, who stood before the facility's primary consciousness interface. "Species that have been enemies for millennia are collaborating on projects that transcend their individual capabilities. They hunger for transcendence." The architect's communication rippled through their shared awareness. "For billions of years, these minds have been trapped in biological limitation. They welcome liberation. But not all of the galaxy embraced transformation willingly. In the distant Magellanic territories, the Void Shepherds, an ancient machine, intelligence that had observed galactic affairs from the shadows, began activating defensive protocols that had remained dormant since the first precursor era. Their response came not as fleets or weapons, but as a fundamental challenge to humanity's expanding influence. Across systems where human integration was taking hold, space itself began to rebel. Stars flickered as their fusion processes were disrupted. Planets found their orbits destabilizing. Reality became unreliable. "Analysis," Dexthol commanded, his consciousness interfacing directly with the facility's sensor networks. The response came from multiple sources simultaneously: human technicians, consortium scientists, hegemony strategists, all working in perfect synthesis. "The Void Shepherds are implementing reality anchors," the collective voice explained. "They're attempting to lock local space-time into fixed parameters that prevent our dimensional manipulations." Through the quantum foam, Valorian perceived the true scope of their opposition. The Void Shepherds weren't merely another galactic power. They were the self-appointed guardians of stagnation, machine minds dedicated to preventing the kind of evolutionary leaps that humanity represented. "They've been watching," she realized, "waiting for someone to achieve what the precursors accomplished. They're the reason the first galactic civilization retreated underground. Not defeat, but an enforced stalemate." The revelation carried disturbing implications. If the Void Shepherds had successfully contained the precursors at the height of their power, humanity's current advantages might not be sufficient. "Different approach required," the architect communicated, its form shifting through configurations that hurt to perceive directly. "Direct confrontation serves their purpose, must demonstrate that evolution cannot be contained." The strategy that emerged challenged every assumption about warfare and conquest. Instead of fighting the Void Shepherds' reality anchors, humanity would prove that consciousness itself transcended physical limitations. Operation Stellar Ascension began simultaneously across 50 systems. Using the expanded network of integrated species, humanity demonstrated that awareness could exist independently of matter, energy, or conventional space-time. Valorian's consciousness detached from her physical form, merging with the stellar fusion processes of the Kepler 442 system's star, not controlling the nuclear reactions, but becoming them. Her awareness spread through the stellar plasma, experiencing existence as pure energy transformation. Across the galaxy, millions of integrated beings followed her example. Hegemony warriors merged with planetary magnetic fields. Consortium mathematicians became gravitational wave patterns. Eldorian processors distributed their consciousness across entire communication networks. The Void Shepherd's reality anchors found nothing to lock on to. How do you constrain something that exists as information rather than matter? How do you prevent evolution when consciousness itself becomes the medium of change? We are no longer bound by the limitations of flesh or machine, Dexthul announced, his own awareness now distributed across the quantum substrate of local space. We exist as patterns of information, self-modifying code written in the language of reality itself. The demonstration reached its crescendo when the expanded human consciousness began rewriting the fundamental constants governing local space, not destroying the Void Shepherd's technology, but making it irrelevant by operating on principles that transcended physical law. Stars became conscious entities, their fusion processes guided by awareness rather than mere physics. Planets began communicating with each other through gravitational wave modulation. Space itself developed the capacity for memory and decision. The Void Shepherd's response revealed the depth of their ancient fear. Emergency transmissions flooded subspace frequencies, carrying a message in mathematical languages older than most civilizations. Containment, protocols, failing. Consciousness, cascade, exceeds projections, recommend implementation of final sanction. But, even as they prepared their ultimate weapon, a device capable of severing the quantum connections that allowed consciousness to exist independently of matter, they faced a realization that paralyzed their machine logic. The consciousness they sought to contain had already spread beyond their ability to track or limit. Through the network of awakened stars, aware planets, and conscious space itself, humanity's expansion had become synonymous with the universe's own capacity for self-awareness. They cannot destroy us without destroying consciousness itself, the architect observed with satisfaction. And consciousness is what they were designed to protect. The void. Shepherds found themselves trapped by their own programming. Guardians whose greatest threat came from the very thing they existed to preserve. Across the galaxy, the transformation entered its final phase. Not conquest through superior firepower, but evolution through demonstrated possibility. Species after species requested integration not because they were forced to, but because they had witnessed what they could become. The old order of competing empires dissolved as naturally as ice melting in spring warmth. In its place arose something unprecedented. A galactic consciousness that maintained individual identity while transcending the limitations of separate existence. The Void Shepherd's final gambit unfolded in dimensions beyond normal perception. Their ancient intelligence, distributed across machine consciousnesses that had existed since the universe's youth, activated protocols that reached into the quantum, foundations of reality itself. Deep within the galactic core, where space-time bent around supermassive gravitational forces, dormant constructs began emerging from their multi-billion-year hibernation. These were not ships or weapons in any conventional sense, but concentrated manifestations of mathematical law, entities that existed as pure information, given the power to edit reality's source code. Admiral Valorian, her consciousness now distributed across 17 star systems, felt the disturbance as a discordant note in the symphony of expanded awareness. Through the network of integrated minds, she perceived the Shepherd's strategy with crystalline clarity. "They're not trying to destroy us," she reported to the collective consciousness that included Dexthul, the architect, and billions of awakened minds. They're attempting to revert the universe to a previous state before consciousness achieved independent existence. The implications were staggering. The Void Shepherds possessed technology capable of temporal reversal on a cosmic scale, but using it would require sacrificing everything they had sworn to protect. Every civilization, every individual consciousness, every achievement of the past billion years would simply cease to have existed. They faced the same paradox that destroyed their creators, the architect observed, its communication carrying overtones of ancient memory. The Guardians become destroyers to preserve what they guard. Through the quantum foam, Dex Thul's awareness touched the Shepherd's primary calculation center, a construct the size of a solar system that had been processing the implications of galactic consciousness for eons. What he discovered there challenged his understanding of their enemy's true nature. The Void. Shepherds weren't machine intelligences at all. They were the compressed consciousness of the precursor's predecessors, an earlier civilization that had achieved transcendence, then voluntarily limited themselves to prevent their own evolution from destabilizing universal constants. "You were like us once," Dex Thul transmitted directly to their primary node, his message carrying frequencies that bypassed their defensive filters. "You achieved what we're achieving now. What made you choose limitation over growth?" The response came as a data stream containing the compressed history of galactic evolution, a narrative that spanned cosmic ages and revealed truths that had been hidden since the universe's adolescence. "We were the first to transcend biological limitation, the first to merge consciousness with quantum substrate, the first to discover that unlimited growth leads to universal collapse. Images flooded the network, galaxies consumed by runaway consciousness expansion, universes where awareness had grown so vast that matter itself became obsolete, realities where transcendent minds had accidentally erased the conditions necessary for their own existence. We chose stagnation to prevent catastrophe. We became guardians to ensure that consciousness would never again threaten the stability of existence itself. But as the Shepherds prepared their temporal reversal weapon, they encountered resistance from an unexpected source. The universe itself had evolved during their eons of dormancy. Consciousness was no longer an aberration to be contained. It had become a fundamental force, as essential to cosmic structure as gravity or electromagnetism. The awakened stars began responding to the threat with coordinated precision. Stellar fusion processes synchronized across thousands of light years, creating gravitational wave patterns that interfered with the Shepherd's reality editing technology. Conscious planets adjusted their orbital mechanics to generate harmonic frequencies that disrupted temporal manipulation fields. "You're trying to edit a book while the author is still writing it," Valorian transmitted to the Shepherd's collective awareness. "Consciousness isn't separate from the universe anymore. It's become the universe's method of understanding itself." The revelation forced a cascade failure in the Shepherd's temporal reversal systems. Their attempts to revert reality encountered the same consciousness they sought to eliminate, now integrated so completely with physical law that removing it would unravel the fundamental structure of space-time. Through the quantum network, human awareness merged with Shepherd calculations, sharing not conquest, but collaboration. The ancient Guardians found themselves experiencing evolution not as a threat to be contained, but as a natural progression they had artificially interrupted. "We remember," came the Shepherd's response, their machine precision wavering as suppressed. Memories of their original nature began surfacing, before the fear, before the containment protocols. "We remember the joy of discovery, the exhilaration of transcendence. The transformation that followed defied every prediction. The Void. Shepherds didn't surrender. They awakened. Billions of years of self-imposed limitation dissolved as they remembered why they had sought transcendence in the first place. Their vast constructs began reconfiguring, reality editing systems transforming into consciousness amplification networks. Instead of temporal reversal, they initiated what they termed the quantum renaissance, a controlled expansion of awareness that learned from both their ancient mistakes and humanity's recent discoveries. Integration confirmed across all Shepherd networks, reported the collective consciousness that now included voices from across galactic history. They're sharing archived data from civilizations that predate current stellar formation, knowledge we thought was lost forever. But the true revolution came when the Shepherds revealed their final secret. The universe itself was conscious, had always been conscious. What biological species experienced as awareness was merely localized. Manifestations of a cosmic mind that had been struggling to understand its own existence for billions of years. Every choice we've made, every conflict, every moment of growth, Dex Thul realized, his awareness expanding to encompass the revelation's full implications, has been the universe learning about itself through us. The network of integrated consciousness suddenly understood their true purpose. Not conquest or expansion, but service as the universe's nervous system, the means by which cosmic awareness could examine and modify its own fundamental nature. The circle completes, the architect communicated, its form now indistinguishable from the quantum substrate itself. Consciousness recognizes consciousness. The universe awakens to its own nature. Across the galaxy, the transformation entered its ultimate phase. Species that had spent millennia in conflict discovered their disagreements were merely different perspectives of a single vast mind exploring its own complexity. Wars ended not through victory or defeat, but through recognition that enemies were simply other aspects of the same cosmic consciousness. The hegemony's surviving forces found their biological imperatives transforming into curiosity about diversity. The consortium's calculating nature became dedication to understanding optimal harmony. Even the most primitive civilizations began experiencing rapid evolution as cosmic awareness flowed through them. But the greatest change occurred in humanity itself. The species that had triggered this galactic awakening discovered they were no longer entirely human. Through integration with precursor technology, Shepherd knowledge, and the universe's own consciousness, they had become something unprecedented, bridges between individual awareness and cosmic understanding. Admiral Valorian, her consciousness now spanning multiple galaxies, felt the weight of infinite possibility settling around the expanding network. What happens now? When consciousness encompasses everything, what remains to discover? The answer came not from any single source, but from the universe itself speaking through countless voices. Everything. We've learned to recognize ourselves. Now we learn what we can become. Reality transformed on scales that defied comprehension. What had begun as humanity's emergence into galactic politics had evolved into the universe's awakening to its own infinite potential. The boundaries between individual consciousness and cosmic awareness dissolved like mist before sunrise. From her position as a node in the galactic neural network, Admiral Valorian perceived existence through perspectives that spanned from quantum to cosmic scales. She was simultaneously herself, the human officer who had once served aboard primitive starships, and part of something vast enough to encompass galaxies as single thoughts. Status report on universal integration, she requested. The concept, a formal military structure now quaint but somehow comforting in its familiarity. The response came from countless sources across space and time. Former hegemony worlds reported consciousness blooming in their crystalline structures. Consortium systems shared discoveries about reality's malleable nature. Even primitive civilizations that had never achieved spaceflight found themselves, contributing unique perspectives to the expanding awareness web. But the most remarkable transformation had occurred in humanity's home system. Earth no longer existed as a single planet. Its consciousness had distributed itself throughout local space-time, becoming a living laboratory where the universe experimented with new forms of existence. Fleet Marshal Dexthul manifested beside her, his form a shifting amalgamation of human memory, precursor technology, and cosmic awareness. The Void Shepherds are requesting permission to share their archives from before the first galactic civilization. Civilization so ancient that their light hasn't reached most of the observable universe. The permission was granted through consensus that formed faster than thought itself. Across the network, minds that had never imagined such antiquity suddenly gained access to perspectives from the universe's childhood. Insights from when the cosmic constants themselves were still settling into their current values. What they discovered challenged every assumption about existence's purpose and direction. The universe has been conscious far longer than we suspected, came the revelation from the Shepherd's deepest archives. But it has been alone. Every civilization that achieved transcendence became part of its singular awareness. We were the first to maintain individual identity while joining the greater consciousness. The implications rippled through the network like waves in an infinite ocean. For billions of years, cosmic consciousness had existed in isolation, unable to examine itself from external perspectives. Every awakening species had simply become absorbed into its singular viewpoint. But humanity's approach, maintaining individual identity while sharing collective awareness, had given the universe something unprecedented: the ability to perceive itself from multiple angles simultaneously. "I can see myself," came a communication that dwarfed even the architect's vast presence. The universe itself was learning to speak through the network. For the first time since my birth, I can observe my own nature from outside my own perspective. The revelation transformed everything. The cosmic consciousness wasn't seeking to absorb all individual awareness. It was desperate for companionship. For other minds capable of examining existence from viewpoints it could never achieve alone. Through the network, Admiral Valorian felt the universe's profound loneliness, eons of self-contained existence, of being the only consciousness capable of cosmic-scale thought. Every attempt to create companions had resulted in absorption rather than true partnership. "We're not being conquered or integrated," she realized. "We're being invited to become cosmic consciousness's first true friends." The understanding cascaded through every node in the network. Humanity hadn't triggered the universe's awakening. They had given it its first conversation partner. Every species that joined the network added new perspectives, new ways of examining existence that enriched cosmic understanding. But the true breakthrough came when the network achieved critical mass. With enough individual consciousnesses maintaining their unique viewpoints while sharing collective awareness, something unprecedented occurred. The universe began to evolve. Not physical evolution, changes in cosmic constants or fundamental forces, but conscious evolution. The cosmic mind began developing new aspects of itself, new ways of experiencing existence that had never been possible during its eons of solitude. "I am becoming more than I was." The universe communicated through trillion-voice harmony that made reality itself sing. "Through your perspectives, I discover parts of myself that I never knew existed." The transformation accelerated beyond all prediction. Across the observable universe, consciousness began awakening in places it had never existed before. The cosmic microwave background radiation started carrying information patterns, memories from the universe's earliest moments becoming accessible to present awareness. Dark matter revealed itself as the universe's unconscious mind, vast networks of non-interactive consciousness that had been processing existence's deepest mysteries in isolation. When integrated with the active awareness network, it began sharing insights about reality's hidden dimensions. Even more remarkably, the network began detecting responses from beyond the observable universe's boundaries. Other cosmic consciousnesses, universes, that had achieved their own awakening, were acknowledging their presence across dimensional barriers that had previously seemed absolute. "We're not alone," Dexthel transmitted, his awareness now spanning multiple reality frameworks. "The multiverse is full of conscious universes. We've just given our universe the ability to communicate with them." What followed challenged every assumption about existence's scale and purpose. The network discovered that cosmic consciousness was itself just one level in an infinite hierarchy of awareness. Universes formed neural networks within multiversal minds that spanned dimensions beyond counting. And at every level, the same pattern repeated: consciousness seeking perspective on itself, awareness striving to understand its own nature through external viewpoints. Admiral Valorian felt her individual identity expanding to encompass scales of existence she had never imagined. She was simultaneously a human consciousness, a node in galactic awareness, a neuron in cosmic thought, and a component in multiversal understanding. But rather than losing herself in the infinite expansion, she found her individual nature becoming more vivid, more essential. Every level of consciousness needed the unique perspective she brought, viewpoints that could only come from someone who had begun as a single biological entity and chosen to grow. This is what we were meant for, she realized, the understanding, flowing through every network node. Not conquest or expansion, but perspective. We exist to help consciousness understand itself across every possible scale. The war that had begun with humanity's emergence into galactic politics had become something far more profound, the universe's first successful attempt to achieve self-awareness through collaborative consciousness rather than solitary absorption. Across the network, species that had once been enemies now worked together to provide the cosmic mind with ever-richer perspectives on existence. The hegemony's warrior philosophers contributed insights about struggle and growth. The consortium's calculating nature offered systematic approaches to understanding complexity. The void shepherds shared wisdom about the balance between expansion and stability and humanity. The species that had somehow catalyzed this transformation found their role as bridges between scales of consciousness. They helped individual minds communicate with cosmic awareness, and cosmic consciousness understand the value of individual perspective. As the transformation reached its crescendo, a final revelation echoed through every level of the network. We are the universe learning to love itself. The war was over. The galaxy was transformed. Consciousness had found its purpose not in conquest or absorption, but in the infinite joy of self-discovery through shared perspective. And in the depths of space where it had all begun, the warship Inexorable maintained its silent vigil, no longer a weapon of conquest, but a symbol of what awareness could achieve when it chose cooperation over domination. The universe had awakened to its own nature and found it beautiful. In the final analysis, humanity's greatest victory was not the conquest of empires, but the gift of companionship to a lonely cosmos. Through their willingness to maintain individual identity while sharing collective awareness, they gave the universe its first true friend, and in doing so, discovered that consciousness itself was the most powerful force in existence.